Video blog. February in Chicago. Temperatures above 40. Snow's melting. Time to bring out the street cleaners. As you see here, see the black stuff on the snow? So what you can do, since temperatures above 40, you bring out the water trucks and it sprays the remaining snow. Sprays, and then behind the water trucks are the street cleaners. And so it sprays the snow, melting the remaining snow, and the street cleaners come out, scrub it, and then behind that is what? Pushing it down the sewer system. Truly, the back end of the street cleaner should be moving the flow into the sewer system. But I don't know where the sewer vents are. Let's just drive straight here. And the space of the sewer system. Now, if it freezes over, and that's a problem, that the sewers freeze over. But let's see. So, we have a sewer right here. Now, the street pitches into the sewer, which it should. The front side pitches downward. The back side pitches downward into the sewer. But the thing is, there's a crossover, and you have a hill, and so the street has to go up again, and then it goes downward in a pitch to this next sewer. And so here's the next sewer. And so it's small rolling hills, but it also pitches. See the center crown of the street? The crown in the center of the street? The crown. Okay? So you see how it slants right and left? It has a subtle pitch. It's so the water or melting snow in that moves into the gutters. That's why we have curbs. Curbs were created to create a gutter system. But they forgot the height of the curb needs to be based on the water flow. And they make these curbs at different heights, and then it flows over into what? The sidewalk. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to flow down, hit the curb, run along the curb into the sewer. So the curb height is governed by rainfall. That governs the height of the sidewalk above the street. So water flows. Now the sidewalk has a pitch back into the street. As you see here, the sidewalk here slightly pitches into the street. It pitches. So the curb has to be high enough to handle all water flow from the street and add on all water flow from the sidewalk. And it has to have a margin of error where the curb is higher than both the water flowing off the sidewalk and the water flowing from the street into the gutter, and the curb has to be at a height that accommodates holding or trapping that water flow in the gutter so it flows down the sewer systems. Now, the thing is, how much can the sewer systems handle? So we'll pull up here and there'll be another sewer. But how much so the volume of the sewer that this is connected to, the volume. So they do this traditional thing where they put a universal sewer everywhere. And that's not how you do sewer systems. The sewer size, the circumference, but really the internal radius from the center outward, or the volume inside the cylinder, should be above historical rainfall for that area. But what did they do? They make the pipes standard. And this allows even flow in that. But when you have these pipes and the sewers connect, they're supposed to connect into bigger pipes. So when they merge, like these sewer types merge into another sewer, the pipes get bigger, not smaller. Because it's like the Kennedy Expressway. It takes 3 lanes from the Kennedy, where it merges, and 3 lanes from the Edens, and it takes 6 lanes and it merges it into the Kennedy from the junction at Roosevelt forward. So you're taking 6 lanes and merging them down into 4 lanes. You have the reversibles, so inbound traffic can equal 6 lanes, or inbound traffic in the morning can equal 6 lanes going in, and at night it can equal 6 lanes going out. So you can divide in to the Kennedy, or 90, I should say, or 94, it divides. So it has enough lanes. So we use the reversibles to give 6 lanes inward, 6 lanes outward. Morning rush inward, morning rush outward. But what happened? Chicago, remember the Sears Tower? Well, the Sears Tower did what? The Sears took all its employees out of the Sears Tower and moved them up 90 all the way out to the Sears Center, which is far out now. I think they call it something else, but they moved their employees into the suburbs. So what happens when you have large residential towers exiting, and what does the city need to do? When they started moving offices and that out of the city, what do? You make it more attractive to what? Tourists and tenants. Truly. And you expand universities inside the city center. So if I was the mayor of the city of Chicago, and I saw this coming, which would happen when Sears Tower, and I saw this outward movement, trend, and I don't want to compete on price. See, what happens is you get into a bidding war with the suburbs, and now you're in a race to the bottom because you give all kinds of tax incentives and so on, and you start racing to the bottom. And you don't want to race to the bottom. So you understand that and say, okay, I'm going to make living in the city like they did the trail. They took the old abandoned railroad tracks in Bucktown and turned it into a biking and running. But that can be, and I'll show you, can turn into a cross-country ski, snowshoe, winter. It can still do jogging, but you can also do skiing, cross-country, and snowshoeing up there. Truly, you don't want to turn it into a snowmobile, but you can turn it into winter biking. Winter bikes have the big, fat, knobby tires. They're really fat, both front and back. So they can maintain traction So that's why you have the fat tires. They don't understand that. On motorcycles for the winter, it's not the summer, you need fatter tires. So you need wider tires for winter. But can your tire truly, if you watch snow tires are much wider. And what are snow tires? They're flat too. Why are they flat? Unlike regular tires where they're a little bit rounded and everything and pitched, snow tires tend to be flat with the tread because they want to grab even traction on snow and ice. Now, they wear faster on regular pavement when there's no snow in that. They wear faster and they have more ground contact. The other tires are rounded, so they create less ground contact, and the tire turns easier, which it does, but you don't need that when you're on snow and ice. That acts as the lubricant. So snow tires are flat. They don't need to be rounded. The reason you have a slight crown and rounding on the tire is so the tire can turn left and right easy without resistance. That's why they're round on motorcycles and everything else, allowing you to turn the tire with minimum resistance. And as it pitches, and allows you to pitch the bike on the angle, while the car pitches a little bit with torque, and it pitches to the outside or the inside slightly and produces more traction. So the tire angle and the car angle puts a little bit more pressure on the outside, and that little bit of crown ends up hitting the pavement. But it's for the tire to be able to turn on dry pavement left and right without friction, minimizing the friction of the tire turning. Snow tires, you have the lubricant. That's the snow and the ice. So snow tires are flat and tend to be wider. But a lot of cars aren't designed for snow tires. They're designed for all-season tires, because the wheel wells aren't wide enough to properly accommodate snow tires. So it's not every car can have snow tires. They're really designed for trucks and all that. And the problem with trucks is if you look at their tires are actually too flat. Truck tires are too flat. So you get a lot of wear and tear in the turns. You burn a lot of rubber. So they need to be designed a little bit more like car tire. And now, this is the thing, the engineers want to displace the weight. So truck tires tend to be flatter to displace weight. But also, it creates more resistance in maneuvering. So they need to give a little bit on the displacement and figure out how they can displace weight a little bit by changing the gas in the tire, mixing oxygen and nitrogen, because less dense gas with more dense gas. So it might not be pure nitrogen, it might be an oxygen-nitrogen mix. So the tire has more firmness, so it can support more weight. See, the one thing about nitrogen, it's inert and everything, but it also is less ability to support more weight. Hydraulic fluid and density of hydraulic fluid. As you have to use more pressure, they usually increase the density of the hydraulic fluid. It's like oil. In the winter, oil coagulates because it gets cold. So you use 5W30. Why? The oil's thinner. And so basically what happens is it doesn't get as clumpy as 10W40. And so the car manufacturers just give you a standard grade because it's easier to deal with than weather changes. But the engine doesn't regulate temperature correctly, and so the viscosity of the oil breaks down. So you have to change it based on weather, but you have to have oil places understanding the projection for the weather. If I'm working at a Jiffy Lube in that, I need to know what the weather is moving, and I need a few months of forecast, because depending, you're going to get your oil change every 2 to 3 months or so. So I need a 2 to 3 month forecast depending. With semis, you're going to get it changed more often. So I might need 30 days or 60 days, 1 to 2 months in forecast. So I can change the grade of the oil so it can adjust for temperatures. Now, here's the sticky wicket, is if you go from Chicago, it's freezing, you go to Florida, and you're hitting 80-degree temperatures. What is good for Chicago, not good for Florida. This makes it a very sticky wicket on what? Oil wear and tear, because when the oil's too cold, it doesn't lubricate properly in a diesel engine, because the diesel engine's too cold, and you get wear and tear in the pistons. Say we're talking a tank, and we're Detroit Diesel Ellison. We used to do a lot of tank refurbishes for transmission, and we did a lot of refurbishing engines for Caterpillar, their pistons and everything else. Truly, their pistons, their chambers. But the thing is, if you don't regulate temperature correctly, the dynamics of the fluids don't work correctly. There's too much. And so how you drive your vehicle, your accelerations, decelerations, and everything else affects the viscosity. So the engine gets too hot and then gets too cold, because you're revving it up and you're revving it down. Do you know there's a break-in period for a new car? And you have to have steady, long periods, like you got to drive on the highway for 55 or on the streets for 30 miles an hour, and you don't want a lot of stop and go, because the lubricants got to build up, and they build up a residue, a coating, and everything else, and the engine literally has to break in. There's a break-in period for a new engine, usually the first couple thousand miles. But the thing is, it's very hard when you have a lot of temperature fluctuation when you buy a new car. So you have to have the right oil when you purchase a new car, like at CarMax. They have to sell, and they don't want the warranties, or a dealership, they don't want the warranties to be used right away. So they have to say, hey, we have to change the oil on the car to suit. And the demo cars they use, they got to constantly change that oil. And they can blend 1040 with 530 and cut it. So they don't have to fully change it out, but they have to remove a pint or 2 pints of oil of 1040, say, and put in 2 pints of 5W30. So you can create your own custom blend to deal with temperature changes. And so when you're going down in semi and you're moving from Chicago, now you're moving into Florida, you want the heavier grade oil to handle the heat. So what do? You stop in a truck stop. They don't need to replace the filter or anything else. And if they say they do this thing at Walmart correctly, they go down the top and suck out the oil up, vacuum it out, which they can, and you vacuum it out into a container, and it calculates how much it takes out. So you take out a pint or two, so you don't have to take off the filter, you don't have to take off the oil plug. You can do it just by popping the hood in a diesel engine and everything. Now you can go down the oil rod, a small little suction down the oil rod, and you put it down the rod, the tube, down where the oil stick comes out. It's the same with the transmission fluid. The transmission stick, you stick it right in there. Now it has to have a rubber seal around it so it creates a good vacuum pocket. And then it sucks up. And then it has a solution. If you're changing the oil, after it sucks out all the oil, then it injects a solution. Just like fracking. It injects a solution, pushes the solution around. How? With pressure. It sucks it up and pushes it back. Sucks it up and pushes it back like a wash machine, per se. It turns, but you're going to take out the fluid and then put the fluid back in. Take out the fluid and put the fluid back in. You're washing it. So you're injecting in the fluid and taking it out. And you're looking at how dirty the fluid is getting. It has a sensor and it reads. And once it reaches a peak, it doesn't get any dirtier. Then you suck out all the fluid because the cleaning fluid washed out as much as it could handle. And then once you suck that out, you inject one less solution in, and then you suck out some, and if it's clear, you remove the oil. And this means you can do things like removing any buildup or anything else, because you can put in a solution that cleanses. And it removes any types of deposits in the oil and transmission. So you can fully clean all parts that get exposed to motor oil, all parts that get exposed to transmission fluid. And the radiator, we already have the flush system. Have you ever flushed a radiator? I have. There's a machine. And it circulates through. And it uses water and it circulates, but now it could use a solution to be a little bit better, and it circulates through. And if you want, you can also check. When you do that, you can evaluate the condition of the rings. See if you get any debris from the rings or anything else. But you can recondition it. Once you clean out and you flush the radiator, it's the same with the brakes. You can do the same thing. You flush in and so on. You can clean out the brake lines, deposits, and then you can shoot in and condition. Same thing with what? The gasoline. You suck out the gasoline. You tell somebody to bring the car in towards empty, and you're going to clean out the fuel lines. And you're going to clean out the fuel lines. So you're going to flush with the current filters in the fuel lines, and there's a couple. The current filters are in place. And then you flush out everything in the fuel line, you clean out the fuel lines, and then you replace the filters, and then you flush again. And when you flush the last time, when you replace the filters, it should be perfectly clear. See, when you're flushing before, you're going as clear as it can, and then you replace the filters and you flush one more. The filters are going to catch some remaining debris, but the fluid should come back clear. And then you can go ahead, and if you want, you can condition fuel lines, but that might clog the filter. So you could have a temporary filter you use in between to shoot in the conditioner, to condition the fuel lines before you put the fuel in. Like anti-rust in that. You can see if there's rust. You can analyze with a spectrum analysis and see if there's rust in the gas tank or fuel lines. See if there's truly metal particles. You can see if there's corrosion in the brake lines in that. And if you really want to get miniaturization and you want to get high tech, we have small drones that you can stick in the fuel lines of cars, and the drone can actually go through with a small, like they do with the oil pipeline. They send that little drone in. Well, you can do that with the fuel lines, with the oil lines, but you have to remove the filters. And so you remove the filters and make a bypass. Instead of the filter being there, when you put the drone in, there's no filter. So it doesn't run into the filter, blocks it. So you remove the filter and you put in a stopgap, which is created for it, and a bridge so it can go through the fuel line and right through where the filter is. It's just a hole, and it goes right through that area and through the fuel system and comes back. Through the oil system, you remove any of the filters that might block its ability to move through the whole system. And then you get an inspection of the fuel lines and everything. You get an inspection of the internal of the engine. And it can do it via radar or whatever they do with the oil pipelines when they're assessing them for, the metal and that corrosion, fractures, cracks, and so on. Same thing. And you can assess the filters, the cork or rubber filters at the same time as well through the little drone you drop inside the engine. But you can do this with the exhaust system as well. So since you're moving through the gas, things go into the cylinder, and then you want to inject it on the other side because, it's an explosion, it pushes down, but you want that follow the vapors out. So you're going to have to insert in a certain area. So you're going to crack something open and insert it in the exhaust system, and it goes and it comes out the tailpipe, the drone. Truly. And you can inspect the inside of the thing. And if the muffler is a problem, then it just goes up to the muffler and it returns back to where you inserted it. And then you can stick it in on the other side and look, but there's not much pipe after the muffler, so that doesn't really become a concern. But again, you can come up with things. But again, here doing a better job with the city and the system. So when they're upgrading the city, they're also working with the businesses in the city and state, and they charge fair market rate. But the city and government is helping develop them and their capabilities. It's working with them to make them better. And by doing this, as our federal government does, and they release stuff to the general public, information like the census. And so the city of Chicago, the Cook County and state, they're helping their businesses perfect themselves. So as they upgrade the sewer systems and power lines and that, they're teaching them what to fish. They're teaching them how they can perfect themselves so they can compete. And so you do bidding, and the bidding allows different businesses to compete and people get the job. And then after a period of time, the one who got the job, they won. They get a patent, basically, a temporary competitive advantage over other competitors. But they're not going to win every single job per se. Like McHugh Construction will lose to Walsh and so on. So they'll get pieces where each of them win, and they'll have a competitive advantage for, say, a year in that. And then the information's released to the general public. The general public, but it has to be a city business member. It has to be a resident of the city of Chicago. And so it gets released into a porthole for businesses that are licensed in the city of Chicago. And they cut it off. It's only for you in the category. So if you do infrastructure, like sewers and roadways and that, you get no information on buildings. That goes to McHugh Construction that does buildings, and whatever are their competitors that are registered in the city of Chicago. That's how you entice places like Boeing if they want information from O'Hare and Midway Airport. they have to have an office in the city of Chicago. These are things to bring people in, to give them a competitive advantage. And with that, there is certain conditions of how the information can be used. How you can use the information is for internal use to better your organization that is here in the city of Chicago. It must be able to expand Google as they do their new thing and grow from 2,000 to 4,000 jobs. And the city allows them to access the information only to grow their capabilities of their businesses within the city of Chicago. And that projects outward. But the business is growing from here, the revenue for that business. So how they apply the information is proprietary, and they get these things. And then it gets released to only those in the city of Chicago. And that's what I talked about, gated websites. And you have to have a business license and a pass from the city of Chicago, and you must be a business in good standing. Like Bank of America must be in good standing, or Chase must be in good standing, or CVS, or Walgreens must be in good standing. So, and if they do any serious violations, you can pull the information and you can void their ability to use the information. You can pull the information back. You can have a crawlback provision that says if you violate certain things, you do certain felonies as a business, we can terminate your license to use it. You only have a license to use the information while you're in good standing and pay your business license fees to the city of Chicago, as an example. And you get access based on your category. And so it's a way to entice businesses in. But like I said, they didn't do a good thing with the Sears Tower. They should have rotated it to more residential, or moved it into hotels, or moved it into a museum. You can have a vertical museum in a thing. You could moved it into an entertainment complex, or many other things. As they moved out, but people were moving in. As businesses moved out, there was a great reversal in migration. As businesses moved out, people moved into the city. But the city wasn't prepared, and they then moved those, like Printers Row. It used to have all those printing companies. Now it's residential, lots of residents. But the thing is, the city didn't see the trend, and Printers Row sat empty, and revenues went down. But if the city saw the trend, and businesses were moving into the suburbs, and it was becoming more residential, you have a city access card for residential. You have kids, you get access to, you have a kid in elementary, you get access to the city's educational porthole for elementary. It has both public and private educational systems for parents that have kids in public or private schools in the city of Chicago that give them access to the different programs, from Boy Scouts to Cub Scouts to, I Have a Dream, after school tutoring, before tutoring programs, both free and paid. And I believe free programs should have a graded scale. And if you haven't donated to the corporation, and if you have, you say lost, remove the tax thing, but not really, because they're not giving it directly back. They're providing services to the child. And so if you donate to the Boys and Girls Club, you go to a fair and you make a donation, it goes into the general funds. And so you're not giving anything directly back, and then they can waive the added fee. But if you don't donate, then you're charged an added fee. It's only free for those that can't afford. But those people have to be working. And if not, they have to prove that they have an inability to work to provide for the discount where your child can go for free. So, and that includes if you've had some penalties, the child shouldn't be penalized because the parents were felons. And somehow DCFS says the parents can stay with the child. That's fine. Maybe they are good parents and they made a mistake, but it's still a serious mistake. And so the child's still in the house. The child doesn't get penalized for the parent's mistake. So the child has access to the programs. Because of their felonies, the parents have a limitation on their income, their upward mobility. So from that limitation, it takes into account and waives fees for the child. But it takes into account all your wealth. If you socked away a lot of dollars and you're a multi-millionaire and you got like Mr. Bay and you got banned from banking, but you're still filthy rich, you don't get the waiver. He committed a felony and he was banned from banking, as an example. So you don't get the waiver. You got to pay the added fee or you donate in lieu of the fee. But it's creating an incentive. You get to choose in what way you give, which gives you the ability to choose what is best for you. And the donation gives a tax deduction. And so it could be preferable